relentless life is the only life worth living.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Relentless Life. This is podcast number 5. I'm your host, Relentless Jake, and I hope you have started off already on a great foot on this Monday morning podcast. It's great to see everybody, and we're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about all good stuff today. Travel and getting it done, sort of. Travel's picking up again, which is a good thing. That means it's a sign that we're starting to hopefully get back to some life again, I'm hoping. Some sort of relative normal. And hopefully normal will be normal someday in the sense of what normal used to be. I know I'm probably a well-wisher, or maybe that makes me an overly optimistic person on what the future holds, but I think that eventually we will hopefully bounce back to the normal stuff. Yep. In the meantime, I got the kombucha going. I got a new flavor here, thanks to the poet. If you watched last week's podcast, there's some tart cherry. That's the poet's recommendation. I tried it. I loved it. And I said, I'm using this one for my next podcast. All right, got the booch in, ready to rock. Where do I start? It's a laughter of nervousness because I'm not, when I started podcasting, it was my way of finally having a voice where I can literally have a voice and not have to worry about, people rolling over you and cutting you off and not listening. This forces you to listen, and if you don't want to listen, you can just shut it off. But it doesn't stop me from at least expressing my perspective on things and maybe giving you a new insight of other perspectives that perhaps you haven't really listened to. And one of the things when I was going to start this podcast, I guess what I was getting at was I was going to try to stay away from, not specifically, but for the most part, avoid staying specifically on fitness. I wanted to focus on current events and things that were going on, whether it's, travel, maybe travel tips, maybe some fun stuff, little political things, and we're touching on that. But for the most part, when we get involved into a lot of things that are happening currently in our country, at least, in the states where I live, fitness is involved, but it's ignored, and it almost makes me feel like I'm forced to talk about it since nobody else is. And the ones who aren't really given a voice. They're just kind of muffled, masked up, so to speak. And it's becoming that's becoming the real pandemic, in my perspective, certainly of what I've seen in the past 9 months or so, 10 months, almost going on a year in this process, that I have literally seen verbatim in travel, state to state. It's different, focus on different political differences, which has probably, it has caused me to lean more one way towards another, because literally, quite frankly, the right has treated me better than the left. I talked about where you take one side or the other, and if you're in the middle, you're kind of lynched by both sides. But that's not entirely true in my life these days. For the most part, the left is the one who literally says, "Hey, you need to have my opinion, otherwise, why no, we're gonna disagree, and I don't really want to hear you out unless we completely agree. You'll be lucky if I divvy out even a fraction of my time for you. I'll give you the leftovers if I even keep you in my life." And that's kind of what I've experienced from the left, always trying to change my mind. The right is often willing to have a debate with me cordially back and forth. And I'm not talking extreme one way or the other. I'm talking about moderate left or moderate right that's reasonable. Because if you're on the far left or far right, there's a good chance you're probably not reasonable and you're not going to listen to the other side anyway. And if you find yourself so opinionated, we're not listening to the other side and trying to at least try to, mitigate where you would originally stand and find a way of common ground to get along with that person, you're probably one of the extremists that I talk about. If you're the people that have decided they're going to go on the comment section and scream and yell at everybody, that you're probably one of the problems, and there's a good chance you're going to come back to me because you are addicted to being angry at people like me. That's just the way it is. I'm for the most part, I guess I'm okay with the strangers being mad at. I'm not so much okay with seeing the differences from one side to the other, being in the center. I'm going to back off a little bit because the first thing I want to talk about is travel that happened just well over a year ago. Is probably like a year and 4 months. We're talking 2019, and I'm going to title this story "Crying Over Spilt Milk," because there's a series of unfortunate events that took place in this travel that I thought it was so comical that I ended up writing it down, and to this day I couldn't wait to start sharing it. It came up, I guess one of the reasons I'm probably talking about it today is that I dreamt about it just recently, and I remember waking up and thinking, man, I just relived that chaotic trip that I took that one week. And I thought to myself, those were the good old days. But so this story begins with basically a hotel stay, and then it snowballs from there. But it goes to a point of St. Louis Airport is perhaps for me the most cursed airport, so much to the point that I try to avoid it, and I literally will drive to St. Louis, and I will if I find myself in traveling in St. Louis, if I have a good option to rent a car and drive back to Chicago or wherever else it is I'm going to go, I will most likely do that than fly out of St. Louis. And again, I will often try to avoid St. Louis. The first time I tried to fly to St. Louis, it was basically the flight was canceled last minute. I went through the checkpoint, the TSA checkpoint. I was in my terminal, and right before we were about to load, to board, they decided they're going to cancel the flight. We're not even running any flights to St. Louis because there's like this pocket, and I'm told St. Louis has like this air pocket that tends to keep, pilots from coming in or going out at some point. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what was told to me, and some other people from St. Louis actually agreed that there's often problems there. Maybe that someone can validate that, fact check me, but I can base it off of my experience that happened at least once. The second time I was in St. Louis, I found myself flying from, I think it was Cincinnati, into St. Louis to do a demo or something, and then it led to training. And then I went back into the airport the following day, was supposed to get out of there early in the morning, and there was a 6.5 hour delay before I even got out of there. There was no weather issues. There was nothing with the airlines. I should pull that back. I guess there was a weather issue in St. Louis, but nowhere else. And at the time I was flying back to Chicago, and again, there was this weather pocket that kept planes from flying out of St. Louis. That was strike two in St. Louis Airport. The third one is by far the most iconic, and that's the one I'm going to talk about today, and that's probably going to be the duration of the podcast. But I do want to, there is a segue into something that I kind of want to relate it to that I think is kind of ironic. But here we go in the St. Louis trip. Don't cry, or actually crying, because I cried. Well, I wanted to, but I laughed instead. But crying over spilt milk is what I'm going to title this story. Flying into St. Louis never happened. I was flying out. I actually drove into St. Louis with a rental car that I dropped off to rent another car. It was just the way the travel worked out. Again, I was trying to avoid the airport. So the only time I was in the airport getting there was to rent the second car, which is what I did. I dropped a car off that I was using Hertz. I switched to Hertz car coming from a completely different state, and rented from Thrifty because Hertz had no cars. So anybody, if you know anything about rentals, for the most part, Hertz they own Thrifty and Dollar. They're kind of like this triangular rental. Hertz is kind of like the umbrella over the three, but for the most part, they are, I believe, three separate companies. So they're not always intertwined. That's kind of a moot point, but I just thought I'd address that because that's going to mean something in a part of this series of unfortunate events that happened to leading up to some other crazy things. So I came from, now I honestly don't remember which state I was coming from. It was drivable. I'm assuming it was either Indianapolis or Cincinnati or something, where it was only, 5 to 6 hours or maybe even less. And I drove into St. Louis, rented another car, so I switched over from Hertz into Thrifty. They're in two different locations or two different lots. If you're familiar with St. Louis, you know what I'm talking about, but they're actually not in the terminal. They're outside of that terminal, which is pretty common for most airports. All right, so rented the car. I'm getting to the hotel. Now, this was before I started doing live workout videos again. I was doing some post-production things, and I was occasionally posting videos like that. I was trying to get back into the routine of posting one workout video a week on the YouTube channel. So I wanted to get into a room that was big enough where I can do some of the moves, because I was trying to incorporate tension bands, and I was thinking about it, and that never worked out. Nevertheless, my status for the Bonvoy at the time wasn't what it is today. So today, if there's an opening for a suite, a lot of times I'll get upgraded without even asking. I didn't have that clout at this point. So I had to ask, and I get there in St. Louis, and it was probably 55, 60% capacity. So I'm like, oh, I have a chance. But that wasn't the case. I asked her, I was like, do you happen to have any suites available? I could certainly use it, for something I'm doing with videoing where I can have some, more open space. And she's like, no, I'm sorry. We're all of our suites are booked. Okay, no problem. So she sent me this room. The room was definitely a shoebox style where it just wasn't going to work the way I was going to. So I completely adjusted the video. And to this day, that room was the reason why I completely ditched tension bands, and I decided I'm not going to travel with weights because this is going to be too difficult in smaller environments. I didn't know that I was going to start to get larger rooms towards the end, and I kind of learned as I traveled along that. But that was the beginning part. It's like, okay, I want a suite. Nope, that ain't happening for you. No big deal. I moved on. I worked through it. I did a video, and it kind of worked out just fine. It was a post-production video, and it ended up getting posted even after all this chaotic stuff. But it did cramp the style of it, and it kind of rebooked everything the way I'm doing it today. So, waking up the next day was going to be the long day. So to give you an idea of the day, I got this last minute call that I was going to go from St. Louis after I was doing a demo in St. Louis. I literally needed to book a flight to go to Detroit, which was a second demo. Fine, it happens. It happens a lot in my profession. So I booked a flight, so I was going to be there, and I had to go straight from St. Louis to Detroit. All right, so I'm going to the office in St. Louis. This is where everything started. Woke up I think I left the room around 6:30. I'm backing up into the office. The sales rep was there because he was going to be there to meet the doctor with me. As I'm backing up, he didn't know I was backing up. He opens the door. I back right into it and put a tiny puncture hole in the plastic bumper of this Toyota Corolla or whatever it was I was renting. I think it was a Toyota. And this is how it started. So when I looked at it, it was like this hairline 3-piece crack that pushed in. And I wasn't sure what that was going to cost, but that's kind of how the day started. Okay, so that gives you an idea of where it was going. So I'm thinking about this first incident, before this day is even beginning. we go through the demo. I get in the car. He told the sales rep, we're good. I'll figure something out. And, I went, my goal is to go right to Walgreens, see if I can pull this thing out, snap it back into place where that little puncture hole is gone and it fills back up that crack and it's, kind of good to go. Went to Walgreens and sure enough, I popped it in and it went from a little split section and it filled right in. So that little puncture, you didn't even notice it. It was like it went from a crack, like a hole, to completely fixed. It was just plastic piece that popped right back into place. So I thought we were good in that sense. So I'm going back to the rental place and not really thinking about it because I know that currently the flight, I had like an hour to get there and I was running late. To some degree, I was running late. Pull into Hertz. And mind you, pull into Hertz, and this, I'm waiting in line, we're dropping it off, and she was trying to scan it in. She's like, "You're not coming in. It says Thrifty." Oh, dummy. That's when it all kind of started. So, all right, so I'm in the wrong area. I had to pull out of there. Thrifty's in a completely different lot, so I had to drive through there. It's all the. And I remember this. I remember this really well because I've been to St. Louis and I've rented numerous cars going there. And Thrifty is not in the typical. If you go down this it's like this frontage road with all of these car rental lots. You have Enterprise. You have what else? Alamo's there. Hertz is there. There may even, I think, Dollar's next to Thrifty. But Thrifty is towards the end and it's in the back. So it's actually closer to the airport, but it's not on that frontage road. You have to actually go past that down the road and then you'll see Thrifty. It took me 25 minutes after leaving Hertz to find Thrifty, which I finally did. And I got in there. But at the time I dropped it off, by the way, there was no incidents with my car. I was never charged for it. And it was fine. I figured at this point, Thrifty owed me anyway for a lot of other incidents that I'm currently not going to get into. I dropped the car off, and now I have like 20 minutes to get to the airport. So I'm waiting for the shuttle. It takes me back. I rush through, and then I get to the TSA. And that's the moment I kind of want to pause for a second, enjoy some kombucha before I talk about the beginnings of everything that starts to happen at this point. If you work for the TSA, don't take anything personally. We all have our own experiences of whatever it is we do. Some good, some bad. There's bad cops out there. There's bad military people out there. There's bad authoritative people out there. Like anybody in an authoritative position, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. I happen to have a bad experience with this particular TSA incident, just because I don't always understand the logic behind the TSA. And I've done a lot of research on things that annoy me, and one of the things that annoys me is that the TSA is I like to call them. I think I read it once where it was security theatrics. Meaning it's the illusion of safety, which we have a lot of in many different elements these days. But the TSA certainly started that, after 9/11 and you had Homeland Security come in and the TSA, we're going to be here to stop terrorism. Lo and behold, they're really, and this is, God forbid it ever happens again, but lo and behold, we actually don't have a lot of people that want to hijack an aircraft. It's one of those freak incidences that will occasionally happen, maybe in a generation, and hopefully that never happens again. And some people would argue that it's worth it to have some sort of like security or deterrent there, in order to prevent somebody to even consider that. But here's the problem with the TSA. If you look into the TSA and you do some research from the time of 2009, I believe, until like 2016, that's where some of the research I've seen, or 2017, where it kind of stopped. The FBI occasionally does these mock tests where they see what they can get past the TSA. The TSA actually had a 95% fail rate of letting specific things of perhaps terrorist threats get through, whether it's bombs or wires or things that just weren't authorized to go through the airport, through the airport security, to get into the terminal. They had a 95% fail rate. In fact, it was so bad that the FBI cut off the exercise early because there was just no point of moving forward since they did so poorly. There never has been an incident with the TSA where they have captured, so to speak, somebody who plotted on doing damage to the aircraft. Now, I know that's unfair considering we have no idea how many people maybe have second-guessed of themselves of going through because of the deterrent of the TSA. But again, there hasn't been a major case where they have been successful. That being said, also, when there was a government shutdown a couple years ago, I think it was back in 2018, they 10% of the TSA, and you can verify this. This is on government websites. 10% of the TSA actually called in sick, and there was absolutely little percent or an infinitesimal percentage of slowdown in all of the airports of the states in the U.S. The slowdown essentially was none, which means I think the TSA, I think the government spends or I guess I should say the taxpayer dollars spend $10 billion a year on TSA security for the airports. And if 10% of the entire industry can call off and it doesn't change the fluidity of what it's doing, it means we're overspending, that we're ineffective with that additional 10%. So we already have too much of that security that is ineffective, 95% ineffective anyway. All right. All it said is before any of you who are listening to this who possibly work for the TSA, I'm just addressing numbers and facts. You're going to have a different perspective if you work for them. Don't get butthurt if you feel like I'm attacking you. I'm not. I'm attacking the industry and its ineffectiveness. Now, I painted that picture to tell you this. There are certain unauthorized things that go through the TSA. I go through TSA security checkpoints 6 times a week sometimes. And if you think about it, like if there's a layover, I have a terminal change. Sometimes you go through a secondary TSA if you leave the airport or whatever the case is. I'm going through it multiple times a week. So I know the rules. I know the tricks. Tricks meaning like how to make my baggage go through faster so they're not pinging me. There are little things that you have to do to make sure that goes better. One of these days I'll kind of share it with you because there are some really good TSA people where I was asking like, what are you guys looking for and what would help the process where I can make it easier for myself to get through? And some of them are really good about that. Not to tell me how to beat security. Obviously, I don't want to take anything unauthorized through, but there's an interesting factoid about that in this particular incident. All right, I'm going to slow it down, pull it back. That was my brakes. I'm gonna take a sip of kombucha. Maybe I've had a little too much already. Too much caffeine, huh? Maybe I should lay off that. Getting through the TSA is where I haven't even gotten past. We haven't even gotten to the major part of the story, but this part starts it. It's really funny because, everyone talks about Zeus. Zeus is my baggage that you'll see sometimes. It's behind me, and it actually is a steel. It's aluminum, but it looks like a steel case where it looks perhaps like something important could be in there, or like in the movies, this is where the bomb is at. It kind of looks like that, and that's not why I got it. It's so obvious that it's not obvious, if that makes sense. It's like nobody would ever in their right minds put a bomb in that type of box and try to put it through the TSA because it has so many bells and whistles on it to make it look like a threat. That bag, my whole point is that box, I call it. It gets through the TSA. Maybe, I think it's been checked 3 times in the 100 and some odd times, maybe even couple hundred hundreds of times I've been through the TSA. My backpack gets nailed. It's probably been nailed a couple dozen times. Again, now I get through usually very smoothly. The TSA is pretty fluid in going through, and I felt like I've perfected a lot of this. But in this particular case, box got through just fine. I was holding on to Zeus, and sure enough, my bag got like, there was some strike on it that just didn't look good to the guy looking at that camera. It's like, what are you looking for in that? This was before, these days I carry 2 tripods. I have my camera, I have a laptop, I have an iPad, I even have one of those Amazon, I can't even think of the name right now, whatever, the Amazon books where I read it from, you know what I'm talking about. Kindle. I even have an Amazon Kindle in there. So there's a lot of technology in there these days. So a lot of people are looking, you got a lot of stuff in there. I get it. I have a lot of stuff. You can just look at it or check it or whatever. It's camera stuff. Open it up. But it's packed in very neatly, and I try to keep things spread out and separated so they can easily see things through that X-ray camera they got. Well, I didn't have any of that stuff in there. I think I had a laptop, and that's it. Everything else, I was checking bags back then, so I was a complete rookie. So nothing of threat was in there. Well, this guy, he grabbed the bag and said, "Whose bag is this?" As I just raised my hand, "That's mine." And he's like, "Okay, I'm going to have to check it. It looks like we just have to check a few things." No problem. And the first thing he's talking about when he's opening up my bag, he's like, "It looks like you might have some snacks in here. Do you have any snacks?" And I was like, "No, there's no snacks in there." He's like, we saw something in here, and he's zipping around, and I'm thinking to myself, who cares if I have snacks? I have pre-check, which, that's here nor there, but oftentimes with pre-check, I don't know what the rules are if you don't go through pre-check, but I looked it up. Anybody can take snacks. You can't take anything over 3 ounces of liquid, which is ridiculous, but I've never failed that one. They really are condescending with people who have their water and forget to dump that out. And it's like, so if you're a rookie traveler and something like that happens, oh my goodness, you're trying to bomb the airport. Anyways, he's looking for snacks. He opened up one thing, and he's like, "What's this up there?" And he pulls out a packet. I was like, "That's protein powder." He's like, "It's not snacks?" I was like, "No, are you looking for snacks?" I don't understand. Well, we have to make sure, is there, if you have snacks, it's fine. I just want to I'm thinking to myself, do you want me to go to the snack bar and pick you up some Hostess cupcakes or something? What is the reason for snacks? Are you looking for weapons? Because to me, that makes more sense than snacks. But if you saw him, you'd probably understand why he was more interested in finding snacks than actually weapons. And pulls open another zipper, which was actually vitamins. He pulls out these packets. Is anything in here? I was like, they're vitamins. I don't know. Have you ever seen pills that look like it's in a packet? They're vitamins. I can promise you, I'm not trying to smuggle cocaine or anything. They're in pill form, unless cocaine is in pill form now. You can test it. You want to break it open and try some? Again, it's kind of reliving this because it's over a year ago. Last thing he pulls out was a harmonica, and it was on the top part of the backpack. I to this day I don't travel with the harmonica anymore, just because the harmonica has pinged me a couple times to be searched. I guess it comes up as a threat because of the metal and the way it looks, and they just don't understand it, and it looks like a bomb. I don't know. So I don't travel with my harmonica anymore. But he pulled that out, and he's unzipping it. He's like, what's in here? I was like, it's a harmonica. You want me to play a song? And that's when I got a little cocky with him, and I probably shouldn't have, but it felt good because I was like, if you're looking for snacks, I do have some almonds in the other pocket that you missed. You're welcome to have them. By the way, TSA for the most part doesn't have a sense of humor, and that's when and I laughed it off. I was laughing, but he didn't find it funny at all. And he's like, "Sir, I'm not trying to hold you up on purpose. We just have to make sure, if we feel something is a threat, we have to check it. And that's when I spoke up again. Are snacks a threat, or are we looking for weapons? And he didn't have an answer, and he basically handed it over to me and said, you're good to go. That story's not over. We're going to come to a conclusion at the end of this very long story. So to make a long story longer, I got through the TSA, held up because of snacks that I didn't have, with the exception of almonds that he let me take because they are authorized to go through to the airport. To this day, I don't know why I got nailed for having snacks and protein powder. I don't understand, but maybe somebody can bring to light to me why that is a problem. All right, next one. Going on and moving on from there was, this is the spilled milk part. This is where things started getting a little wonky in the trip because I'm already flustered, right? And I already was running late, by the way. I didn't mention that, but this guy's looking for snacks, and I'm looking at the clock, and I have like 5 minutes to get to my terminal. So when he was done, I grabbed my bag, I grabbed my box, and I started running towards the terminal, only to discover I had a 2-hour delay. Of course I do. This is St. Louis. This is the epitome of rotten luck for Jake. It is a cursed airport. Cursed. I kid you not. It's cursed for me. And this one just validated all of that other stuff that happened before. And even to this day, I'm convinced I need to divert myself away from St. Louis. If at any point I have an opportunity to do so, I will continue to avoid St. Louis Airport. All right, so I noticed the 2-hour delay. I said, all right, no big deal. I just, I had my video that I shot in the hotel. I was like, I'm going to break open my laptop and I'm going to start editing that video and get it ready for post and just get ahead of schedule because, as long as I got it posted, I'm getting the ball rolling and that always feels good. So anytime I have a chance to work, I'm going to do it. Laid everything down, put my laptop down, and it was an empty airport. I mean, there wasn't a lot of people there. A lot of empty seats. You would think it was COVID. When I've been in airports during COVID and it's been like a ghost town, it wasn't that bad, but there certainly wasn't a lot of people there. In spite of that, I picked a seat where I thought I'd be alone and have my own free time, my own space, my own quiet space, my dome of silence, basically. Dome silence. I put my headphones on and I started to edit. And certainly there's always that person. When you go to the gym, there's 15 treadmills. You go on the very far treadmill and some meatbag decides, oh, there's another treadmill right next to him and I'm going to go on here and do these weird stretches right next to you. That happens to me all the time. If I like anything about COVID, I like the social distancing portion of it, of people who just don't know how to maintain space. And we don't push social distancing as much as we should because I like that portion. Social distancing is important until it affects the corporation's pocketbooks. And then suddenly, it's not really about social distancing. It's mainly about making sure you cover your mouth and wash your hands and that stuff. Really? Yeah, that makes sense since now that we're sitting 3 across, you're making more money. Suddenly, social distancing isn't as important. Just wear a mask. That'll make you feel comfy inside. Yeah, social distancing. I like that portion, and I wish people would embrace that more. Well, I had a girl with 3 kids, and her idea of social distancing was, there's somebody who needs some company. Let me go sit right next to him, even though there's 16,000 empty seats all over the airport that I can choose from. I'm going to choose the one in the corner where I can be loud next to the guy with the laptop. All right, well, my headphones are on. They're kids are going to be kids, and, the kids are jumping on the seats. They're right next to me, jumping on the seats, and they're screaming and hollering, and she's scolding him and playing and having fun. That's fine. And then I noticed from the corner of my eye, she decided it was milk time. Yep, literal milk. So over spilt milk. You can probably guess where this story is going. Now, look. I don't have kids. I don't profess to know anything about kids. I know that I act like a kid. I'm immature. I tend to get along with kids because they look at me as like a big kid in many ways, or an orangutan, and they can just had somebody to laugh at. They like the pterodactyl. They like things like that. I get along with kids. I really do. But I've never professed to be like a parent, and I don't try to say this is the way parents should act because I know it's like, oh, if you had kids, you would say that. But, okay, that all being said, even though I don't have kids, I know it's a bad idea to keep open milk without a top on it next to a stranger who has a laptop when my kids are jumping around. That's a setup for disaster. And I saw that happening. She put this laptop right next to, there's an arm bar that separated me and her two kids, and her three kids and herself. There were three kids, but one was, I don't know, running around the airport, stealing snacks or something. And the other two were kind of playing and jumping around. And she put the milk on that arm bar right next to me. My laptop is on my lap. And I thought, oh, this can't be good. Let me close the laptop. Let's put it away, and I'm going to relocate. That's at this point. It's been about 5-10 minutes. It was enough, and I was going to relocate, get a cup of coffee, and go sit somewhere else. No sooner did I close my laptop, all things predicted in Jake's little noodle brain came to fruition. Sure enough, the kid was laying on her lap and kicking and screaming, and boop, the cup kicked towards me and splashed all over my lap. Just the moment that I pulled the laptop out and was putting it in my bag, nothing but a lap of milk, drenched in the whole container, literally just a geyser of nasty breast milk probably all over my lap. And knowing I'm going to have to get on this aircraft cramped in with the stench of milk. I don't drink milk. I don't like milk. I'm not lactose intolerant, but I'm also not a child. I'm a grown man, so I'm over milk. I'm just not a dairy guy. And the last thing I want to do is smell milk. And that's what happened. She kicked it and it splashed all over. And there was a pause for a second to see. And she looked at me and she covers her mouth. And I thought she was going to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." That is not what came out of her mouth. As she was closing her mouth, she opened up and she starts laughing. She's like, he does that all the time. This is, believe it or not, this is the second time this happened today. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I actually believe that, considering you were the reckless baboon that decided to put the milk right next to me. What did you think was going to happen? Not an apology, not an I'm sorry. She's like, yeah, it's kids, right? It could be worse, I suppose. I just looked at her, didn't say anything, went straight to the bathroom, and just tried to dry off. This was my moment of going to... at this point, kind of drying off and getting into boarding on the airport, on the terminal. I'm having a flashback of this milk incident, and it's starting to annoy me. To this day, I don't understand that reaction, but there was never an apology from what I remember. If she did it, I didn't hear it, and I had my headphones off at the time. Like, I pulled everything off, and I thought for sure it had been like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. What can I do? I wasn't paying attention. It's really my bad." None of that. It was literally a laughter and a supposed kids will be kids, as you know. No, I don't really know. Anyway, that deserves a kombucha shot. All right. So it was boarding time. Hour and a half passes by. It's boarding time. Again, remind you, I was delayed. I don't know if anybody else smelled it, but I didn't have a change of clothes because I was checking a bag these days, so I didn't have clothes nearby to change into. Otherwise, these days I would have been prepared for it these days. I can promise you, I am prepared for all cases of stupidity that at least I've seen. Something new of dumb may come up someday, and that will change the way I travel again. But travel has gotten a lot more proficient since I've gone through a lot of these chaotic events. This is one of them. The spilt milk is one of the major reasons why I stopped checking bags and started putting clothes in my bag and learned the techniques of not having to actually check a bag. There's another reason why I don't check bags, and this trip is also involved in that. I just haven't gotten to it. We're like 40 minutes into this podcast, and there's a lot more of this story to go. I apologize in advance, but I got to talk about this. Anyway, I get into the terminal. Status was good. When I flew, it wasn't the same as it was for my hotel. So I had a little bit more clout. I'm one of the first ones on the aircraft, and that's not a way of bragging. That's just saying, hey, I don't have a life and I travel a lot. So one of the kind things these flights can do is let business travelers on a little bit earlier. And that's what happened. I was one of the first ones on the plane, and I get Mary Beth from North Carolina or wherever. No offense, Scott Poe, if you're out there. I love people from North Carolina. I don't know where she was from, but she was determined she was going to get her way, and this is how this occurred. So I'm walking in, smelling that spoiled milk on my pants, putting my box overhead, and I was taking my backpack and I was sliding it underneath my seat, getting ready to just basically get comfortable where I was at. And she's like, "Sir, do you drink beer?" Just like that. I was like, "No, I'm good, thanks." No, you don't understand. You drink beer? You want alcohol or something? I was like, "No, I'm good, thank you." "Come on, do me a solid here." And that's when I knew she was just basically trying to coerce me and doing something to help her out and probably do something that she's not supposed to do and she's going to ask me to do. And sure enough, she did. At the time I flew Southwest. I no longer fly Southwest for a lot of reasons, this being one of them, because this is not the first case where I've had flight attendants really just, I feel, be really unprofessional. And they're not all like that. If you, again, don't take offense to that. If you fly Southwest, you might be one of the more professionals. But I haven't had a good experience with flight attendants on Southwest. Not as a business traveler. As a leisure traveler, when you're not flying all the time, it's probably fun. Their canned jokes are probably hilarious to you. I find them a little annoying. I find a lot of what they do a little condescending. And this was one of those cases that kind of brought to light that maybe I should find a new airline to fly with. And sure enough, she was determined that she's going to ask me to save seats. She's like, "I'm going to need you to save these 3 seats. When they come by, just try to get people to sit somewhere else." She wasn't that bad as far as the Southern accent, and I know that's terrible, but it's the only way that I could get through this without getting too angry, because it's sparking all these new emotions that I didn't realize I had from this trip. So, still fun. It's making me smile, so that's all that matters, I suppose. So I'm thinking, I asked her, I said, "Well, you want me to save seats?" I don't know if anybody, those listeners out there, not everybody has probably flown Southwest, but one thing about Southwest is that there aren't assigned seats, and that can be good and bad. And this is one of those cases where it's bad because you're not allowed to actually save seats. And a flight attendant is certainly not allowed to ask you, too much kombucha, not allowed to ask you to save seats. It was way beyond protocol. And I'm assuming, Southwest actually, like, in their own way, which I thought was cheap, but in their own way, to be fair, they tried to apologize about that when I brought it up. And so they in my opinion, they made that right because they took responsibility for her actions. Nevertheless, she wanted me to have people walk past a very desirable area of 3 seats and say, "These are blocked." And what she did is she put all the trays down so people would look at it and say, "Well, why are the trays down?" And a lot of people wanted that seat or wanted those 3 seats because it was a desirable area. It was up front. It's first come, first served. There's nobody there. Why would I not sit there? And here's this chump, me, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry. These seats are being saved," thinking, "Oh, I'm saving them." So I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to do that. I'm not taking responsibility to say I'm going to be the douchebag that saves seats. So instead, she's standing behind me, and I was like, for whatever reason, this lady wants me to say these seats are saved. She was pissed about that, but I didn't care. I did it anyway. And people were just like blown away by that. And they were walking past, and there must have been 15 people I told to not sit there. But I blamed her every time. I'm sorry, the flight attendant asked me to say that those are saved for some reason. What's going on? Is there one of her friends sitting there? I was like, I don't know. She asked me to save them for some reason. She heard the whole thing. She didn't say a word. She didn't say a word to me afterwards, and I didn't even acknowledge her after all this was done. I just put my headphones on and closed my eyes the rest of the flight. I couldn't wait to get it done. To make a long story short on that part of the flight, it was one of her flight attendant friends that had her 2 kids that she wanted to sit there. And she couldn't save those seats for her, so she wanted me to do it for her. Which I thought was way beyond protocol and completely unprofessional and all that other jazz. And it didn't surprise me given the nature of the way this trip was going. I said a lot of words to basically, that was probably maybe 15 minutes of the flight. It wasn't a big deal because now I'm going from St. Louis to Detroit, not a long flight. So I thought, okay, those won't be any problems. I'm going to get to Detroit a little later than I had planned because we were 2 hours delayed. So instead of getting there at 8 o'clock, which was the initial time, it looks like I was going to get there around 10:30. Okay, that's still reasonable. I have to be in the office the next morning by 6. So it's going to be a tight fit, but 10 o'clock, 10:30, even 11 o'clock, that's doable. No problem. And then round 3. That means kombucha break for me. Oh, man, I'm having so much fun. I don't know if I'm driving you guys crazy, but this was a trip from hell. It really was. It's funny because a lot of this is from memory, and the more I talk about it, the more I'm reminded of little nuances that took place in this. And I'm like, oh, man, that's right. I forgot about that. I couldn't believe all the things that happened in this trip. So, okay, we get into Detroit, and this is where things sometimes in life, there are things that you don't even want to tell people because they're going to sound so unbelievable. That you guys are going to think that I'm completely fabricating the entire story, or at least embellishing it to some degree. And I can tell you, I might have hammed up the story to this point, but most of it's been basically to a T true. Unless there's a detail that I might have missed or a time or time frame or kind of getting some of it wrong, it's been kind of down the board true. This part is so vivid in my brain that I actually dreamt about it again and almost exactly the way it happened. It's so unbelievable that you couldn't write it to make it make any sense. It could even make a movie because people are like, there's no way any of that happens. It happened. All right. So, like I said, I did check a bag in Detroit, and this is where things were weird. The funny thing is, when I rented the car I'm going to backtrack a little bit because I'm going to go back to St. Louis. So I rented the car in St. Louis, and I dropped it off at Thrifty. I felt like I got past one. Like, oh, yeah, it kind of worked. I didn't technically damage their car. I fixed it for them. There was no harm, no foul. But then, of course, I got punished for that by the spilt milk and perhaps being harassed by the TSA. And then, of course, the flight attendant issue. I'm like, I don't know. Is all this starting to come back to me because, of the TSA thing? I'm being punished for it. But then I'm like, okay, things could change. I'm back in Detroit. Things could get a little bit better. And sure enough, when the belt rang, it started bringing around. The first bag to come down the chute was mine. And, to be honest, all the times I've checked a bag, that's never happened for me. And I checked a lot of bags that first year. My bag is usually one of the last ones for some reason. and that's just kind of like Murphy's Law, right? If it's bound to happen, it's probably going to happen. That's kind of the nature of this entire trip. Well, this case, the first bag to come out was mine. And I'm starting to think it was just perfect the way it was supposed to be timed, because the fact that my bag came out early, I think, is the reason why everything became such a late night. If it would have come out later, I would have just missed all the bad chaos that took place to that point. And then we conclude in a happy ending, I can promise you. It's funny, at least. I don't know about happy. It's funny. So I grabbed my bag. I was like, woohoo, life is good. We're rolling, and I'm getting lucky again. This trip is going to be easy. So I ordered the Uber. And anybody who's been to Detroit knows that you go up this escalator. There's a part of the escalator that goes up 2 stories, not 1. So it passes a floor, and then it goes into the next one. Well, with Detroit, and some airports are like this, you have to go up the escalator, go across a bridge, and go down the other side of the escalator outside where you meet the Uber people. And it sounds confusing, but I feel like Detroit has a really neat setup. And I've always liked that about them. So I was excited. The Uber will probably be almost waiting there, and I'll be out of here by 10:45 and probably to my hotel by, 11:20 or so. Nope. No, sirree. Not a chance, Bobaroo. That's not the case here. Here's what happened. I started going towards the escalator, and I had a different box back then. It was clunkier, but this is the box that I checked. This is the bag that I checked, the luggage. There was this family of 4 that were sprinting across the escalator. Where they cut me off when I was coming up, which caught hold of the mother or the older lady. I say older lady, I mean, she's probably my age. Some are like, older, much older. but I mean, she was my age, and then they had 2 younger kids and a dad, and they were sprinting. I don't know if they couldn't have been late. We're in the baggage check area, so none of it made sense why they were running. But it clipped my bag, not Zeus, the box, not the aluminum box. I had this black plastic luggage. Caught it by the pulley, the bar that you drag it with, you roll it around with, and it pulled it out of my hand onto the escalator, where it toppled literally all the way down the escalator. Now, mind you, this escalator goes all the way down to the bottom floor. I was already at the top floor. And it fell halfway down. Luckily, there was nobody. It was, the airport was quiet. It was later. It was almost 11 o'clock. And it toppled down 2 floors, where it's like, okay, go down there and chase it. But I originally didn't know where it went, because I was past the escalator when they clipped it, and it pulled it down. I'm like, where's my bag? And literally, I thought it was like, around there was a staircase there, and I thought, did it go down the staircase? It was gone. And when she clipped it, she's like, I'm so sorry. And I didn't hear anything else. All I heard was she did apologize, but they kept running. And my bag was gone. I was looking at them, and I'm thinking, did they take my bag? What's going on? I couldn't find it. And so at the time, I didn't even realize that it actually went down 2 stories until I started looking around, and a security guy came around. I was going down the first flight of stairs. I didn't go down the escalator. I was walking down the flight of stairs, and he's like, "Hey, were you looking for that bag?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, it's downstairs. You're gonna have to go down there and get it." I was like, he's like, "Gotta be careful there. Lucky there was no one down there." And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't throw the bag down there. Some crazy lady clipped it and flung it down there. Had nothing to do with me. But I took the scolding, and I was headed down there to find the bag. And I got down there. I was at the bottom of the escalator. It took me about, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes to get to that point. Because, in the duration of like it being clipped, or it felt like 10 minutes, me being clipped and the bag getting flung, I was on the top floor looking for where it went, and still kind of confused as to what just happened. And so by the time I got to the bottom, the bag wasn't even there. It was enough time. And let me pause. Let's take a break. Let's take a breather. Jake, deep breath in and slow exhale. I told you this was unbelievable. Yeah. I couldn't find the bag. But I wanted to take a pause because something I forgot. After I got the bag from the belt, I actually already ordered the Uber. So when my bag got clipped, the Uber already pinged me to say she was waiting. That's how efficient the Uber runs in Detroit. I've always had good luck in getting an Uber from Detroit and going to whatever hotel I was going to, and I knew it was efficient because I've done it before. The Uber was waiting for me, and the rule with Uber is they can wait for you for 5 minutes. And then they have no choice. That completely resets, and then they lose you. You can't call them back. So if you call another Uber, you have to wait. Well, the clock was ticking, and I knew the clock was ticking because I'm watching the Uber app while I'm trying to find my bag. And when I got to the bottom, the bag was gone, and I'm looking around for a security person. There was no one there, and finally I was like, hey, did anybody see a bag? Nobody knew where the bag was. So I finally went to like this baggage lost and found. They directed me towards the whatever airline was there, where they took like bags that weren't accepted from the belt. Well, my bag, someone saw it on the bottom and they just brought it over there instead of just kind of putting it in the corner. But that makes sense. They didn't want a bag unattended by itself. That would be considered a potential threat of a bomb. Like that would freak security people out, and that one is justified in my opinion. So I didn't get as mad about that, but it was just it was frustrating because I had about 4 minutes into my Uber waiting for me. So I had about 50 seconds to get back up the stairs, over the bridge, and then back down the stairs. This Uber driver was awesome. She called me. I was like, look, I'm so sorry. I had an issue with a bag. I'm on my way. She's like, sure, I'll wait as long as I can. You have about 50 seconds before I can hit it. And I understand why she didn't want to just hit accept, because if I never show up, she's taking that hit now. So I had to actually get in the car. I'm sprinting literally up the escalator, struggling. By the way, the bag that was launched down this two stories of escalator, the handle was now broken, so I couldn't pull it because it was basically ripped off. So I'm trying to carry it, as well as carry Zeus and my backpack, and sprint up the escalator, go over the bridge, down the other escalator, outside into the garage, just in time for her to tell me, I'm so sorry, it cleared. Meaning the time was up where I couldn't actually ride in that Uber. I had to order another one. So crap. All right. It was around 10:55, almost 11 o'clock, where I ordered another Uber. It came in about 15 minutes, no big deal. We're looking at around 11:15, I think, when I took the next Uber. I know it was close to midnight because getting towards the end of this story, I'm thinking to myself, this is a case where this Uber driver is going to get lost. Because I'm probably 20 minutes from my hotel, and it took us. Well, the Uber driver didn't purposely get lost, but the app sent him a different way, which caused him to have to turn around. And then when he turned around, we got a train. And so the train was about, I don't know, another 15 minutes. So a 20-minute drive, Uber drive to the hotel turned out to be almost 45 minutes. There it was. There's my hotel. I finally got there. I got to the hotel just after midnight. I think it was 12:10, something like that. I was fit to be tied at this point. I mean, I was exhausted. Everything was like, I was no longer like annoyed anymore, though. I think I was at a point where it's just like I kind of expect anything. I'm like, I'm going to get to this. I'm going to get to this hotel, and she's going to say, we don't have any rooms for you. We're going to have to like tell you to go. We're no vacancy, and your reservation isn't here. We don't know you. Typed it in. She's really bubbly. I'm thinking, man, this girl has way too much energy at midnight. It must have been shift change or something, because she's like, how you doing? Good to see you. I'm like, yeah. How's your trip? How's your day been going? Fantastic. All right. Well, I'm hooking you up. I've got a good room for you. All right. No problem. Thank you. I just, at this point, give me a room so I can go to bed. She's like, do you have a floor preference? She's being very nice. And I was like, not really, but if you have something on the first floor, before I even got the words out, she's like, I have the perfect spot for you on the first floor. Great. Send me there. I didn't care at this point. I just wanted to go. She sends me on this journey. I was in a Marriott in Detroit where it was like a mile. It felt. It was several blocks long. I mean, it's just it was a huge spread out hotel, and it was all the way down at the end. You made a left. It was all the way down at that end, and then you make a right, and then there's the room. It's in the corner unit. I'm walking down here. I'm not kidding you. I think by the time I actually entered the room, it was about 12:25, and I got there it was like a 10-15 minute process of getting checked in and getting over to my hotel to my hotel room. At this point, I'm almost like, whatever. I'm finally here. Scanned it in. Opened the door, and sure enough, probably the largest suite I've ever seen. Since then I've been probably in larger suites, but from that point, anything before that, it was definitely the largest suite I've ever been in. And I just started laughing. Of course, now I would get something, like of this size, that I'm not doing a video. I needed this yesterday, and now it's midnight or beyond midnight, and I have to get up in 4 hours. And she puts me in the biggest suite they had. It was hilarious. But that's not the end of the story. Remember the TSA guy worried about snacks? This is what makes the entire story completely unbelievable, or you just can't write this stuff. I'm pulling out some of my gear from my bag, and I have two wallets when I travel. I have my traveling wallet, and then I have a secondary wallet just in case my other wallet gets lost, and I have some money in separate cards and stuff. That way, and even a separate ID, just in case something happens. I'm not going to slow down travel, and I can cancel the other credit cards. I've been traveling that way since I've started traveling. So I have a secondary wallet, but it's in this secondary secret pocket that my bag has. So I went in there for whatever reason. Oh, I remember, because I had some money in there, and I was going to actually tip this lady, and I wanted to pull it out. So I remembered for the next day, because she was going to be there when I left. So I was going to just hand it to her and say, thanks for being so nice at the end of the day. So I was going to get that secondary wallet. And what did I pull out? With snacks. No, no snacks. But the irony of it all is, sometimes when I travel the city in Chicago, I'll carry a knife, or I'll carry something else, or I'll carry whatever. I do have a concealed and carry, so I do carry guns occasionally, depending on where I go. I carry everything safely, so calm down. This was one of those cases. It wasn't a gun, but I do have. It's called a push dagger, which is basically something that goes in your hand and it comes through your fingertips, where it's like this blade, but it's not a metal blade. It's like a plastic blade, but still very deadly. And it's a plastic dagger that I kept in there, completely forgot I had it there. And it's been in that bag. It was in that bag for at least 2 months. It went through all the TSA checks, never caught. The one time the bag was checked, and literally he went in that pocket, because I know he went in that pocket because that's where my protein was at, and he completely bypassed it because he was more concerned about finding snacks than actually looking for weapons. And sure enough, I had a very deadly weapon in the bag that he never caught. Checkmate, I win. Oh, man. Sorry. Thanks for allowing me to indulge myself in my own sludge of a story. Why did I say all that? I said all that to say this. Even though that was probably one of the most chaotic trips I've had, and I've had some crazies, but in the series of events that took place in about 48 hours, that was probably one of the more colorful trips I've had. Laughable. And as bad as the points were, after I dreamt about it the other day, I remember waking up and thinking, man, I would trade any trip these days for that one. Isn't that interesting? The way things have changed, that the worst trip of 2019 for me is still a better trip in my eyes than all of the great trips that I've had. The trips these days have been relatively smooth. There hasn't been a lot of problems. You know, I've certainly gotten better at traveling. I don't have to worry about some of the headaches. I learned a lot from that trip of how I wasn't going to travel anymore. But it's interesting because, you know, from the TSA guy to the flight attendant to the mother who spilt the milk, to the Uber driver, all the way to the end where I talked to the very friendly staff in the hotel. I was able to interact with people that you just can't do these days. You see faces, you see reactions, you get feedback, you feed off that energy, good or bad, you feed off of it. And for a professional traveler, anybody who travels for a living understands what I'm saying. And even if you don't travel for a living, you understand what I'm saying when I say this. We're creatures. We're creatures of culture, of affirmation from others, of feedback from others, of give and take, whether communication's good or bad. A give and take is what gives us energy and life, and reason to have life, and reason to have purpose, and reason to be able to seize the day, as opposed to trapping yourself in four walls, or covering your face and pretending that other people are just drones, and perhaps even worse off, that they're just lepers, and we should fear everybody at this point. You know, the couple weeks ago, the travel that I did kind of brought to light a lot of things that I face, you know, in today's day and age of travel, where, you know, I wake up early. I wake up at 4:30 in the morning. When you leave, the moment you leave the hotel room, you're wearing a mask. That's just the rules. That's standard, and I'm used to that. So by 6:30 when I leave the door, let's say 7 o'clock to be fair. By 7 o'clock, I leave the hotel room. My mask is on. Whether I rent a car or whether I take an Uber, my mask is on. Unless I rent a car, of course, I take it off. But in this case, I tried not to rent. You know, I was close to a lot of these offices, so I took a lot of Ubers then. So my mask is on in the hotel. It's on in the Uber. These are all the rules. You get to the office. The mask is on in the office. I'm in the office 10 to 12 hours that day. And 10 hours. It actually was about 10 hours each day. Mask is still on. That's kombucha coming back, saying thank you, Jake, for taking care of me on this wonderful tart cherry. Thanks, Scott, again. It's helping me. Yeah, through the office, and then I get in an Uber. Mask is still on. Then I get into the hotel. Mask is still on, and then I get into my hotel room. By 8 o'clock at night, for 6 straight days, that was the routine. And that is the routine for the most part. wearing a mask, 15 to 16 hours a day where I just see eyeballs and sort of guess what people are saying or doing in their facial reactions, because emojis would be better than actually just seeing eyes and facial features and, not getting that same feedback. You don't get that same connection, that same interaction. I don't get that face-to-face conversation with people that many would do. I mean, there are a lot of people who probably go through that the same way, but then they go home, they go to their wife, their husband, their kids, and they get interaction with other faces and smiles and feedback. And, that's important, even for people that probably used to think they don't need things like that. Everybody needs that at some point. And we're not offering that in this country anymore. When's the last time you've seen smiles and laughter? And if you have, consider yourself lucky. Consider yourself rich in some ways. You are culturally, emotionally, and intellectually rich. Intellectually being surrounded by other people that can converse with you and be a human with you without the elements that are encapsulated in technology that block some of those same emotions. Sure, I mean, I can see people through Zoom and through Facebook or Skype or whatever it is you can use through technology, but that's not the same thing as actually being able to sit down and have a face-to-face conversation day in and day out of nothing but mask wearing. That's the interesting thing. I think the real eye-opener for me was, I did it Monday through Friday. I got home Friday, and Friday I had a very, very, very bad case, worse than I ever have, of flu. A lot of times when adults get flu, you don't actually vomit, and I don't mean to gross you out, but that was one of those events where, by Friday, the doctor asked me about that, and I said, well, this is kind of the case, and he's like, I'm going to recommend you change your mask a couple times a day, because it's one of the biggest threats is that, even though you might have had the ability or the immune system to fight off a virus like, you used to, this is one of those cases where somehow you contracted it and you kept breathing in, that bad air of germs that, you were kind of living with. And, I think I've talked about that before, in a previous podcast where it's like, well, some people would say, well, at least you didn't spread it to somebody else. But that's the point. The point is I was wearing a mask for 15 hours a day and somehow I contracted a virus. The mask certainly didn't protect me. So somebody else who was also masked up, because I'm not around anybody who doesn't have masks, gave it to me. I got it somehow. Whether it was on the airport or whether it was in the hotel or whether it was at the office with one of the patients or doctors, somebody gave it to me. And it was in the guise of all the rules with the mask. And I'm not anti-mask. Nobody follows the rules more of a mask than I do. But it's interesting because there's that moment where, and I had this moment, this was a while back, but there was one moment after that time. It was literally one of those moments where I had a mask on for about 15 hours that day. I rented the car and I was driving out of the rental area where you go through the gate. You hand them your license and everything. They check it and you go on your way. And my mask was off after 15 hours. There's a partition that separates. She had a visor on. She had gloves on. My mask was off, and she literally wouldn't get close to my car until I put a mask on. This is the fear that I think we live in, that I don't think we're privy to the knowledge of what it is. We're so caught up and bought into this fear-mongering, this narrative that has taken place that becomes more important than knowing your kind, knowing mankind and treating them like human beings. We don't do that anymore. It's like you're just going to have to understand, because it's COVID and COVID is deadly. So when this is all over, we can go back to normal then. Actually, your normal is not going to be my normal when normal goes back to normal, because I'm living through a different COVID than many people. And that COVID means something to me. That's the unsaid pandemic that's going on in this world, and it's the rift that's being created to this narrative of mask wearers who have completely congratulated themselves into being virtuous, and the ones that even insinuate the mask is ineffective, or at least not as effective as they're claiming to be, get coined all these things, get judged all these things before they even have a chance to create any scientific argument. And it's funny because people will, pro-mask wearers, when I say pro-mask wearers, again, I follow the rules to a T, because I don't want to get into it with people who love scolding others for not wearing their mask properly. And I'm laughing because I'm actually thinking of something that happened literally the other day, where I'm sitting in Kansas, and there's like 18 of us, maybe 20, going on this flight, and we're all sitting around, we're waiting to board, and this poor guy just took a sip of water. He's fumbling with his mask as he's pulling it up, as he's putting the water into the cup holder. The mask was just below the nose. Now, mind you, I watched him in my periphery, and he had his mask on properly before that, but I knew he took a sip of water, and he's fumbling to get it above his nose again. And there's this woman who works there in the airport that stops in her tracks and turns around, does a pivot 180, and's like, sir, like 4 times, finally got his attention. He's like, sir, you need to pull your mask up above your nose. Let's be proper. And then walks away. And he was so cool about it. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is why I follow the rules, because I don't know if my reaction would have been as professional. Those people out there who feel the need to be mask police, what are you going to do when this is over? Because at some point, I know I joke about like the masks are taking over and the government. I had a dream that the government was like requiring us to wear these special masks that they had to chip in. They were going to follow us around, and I didn't have my mask in my dream, and they were chasing me. But that's just a dream. I think in reality, at some point we are gonna go back to the point where nobody wears masks, and these people who are enjoying this new unsung hero of like, I'm gonna strap on my virtuous vest, and I'm gonna scold everybody who doesn't correctly wear a mask, or if it's not properly put up above their nose in the right time that I think it should be, I'm gonna say, shame on you. They talk about it's often the same type of people who will talk about like the racists, the xenophobes, the homophobes. That they'll coin anybody anything else if you disagree with them, but they're often the most judgmental people towards anybody that doesn't agree with them on their end. So if you don't agree with them, you're everything else, and the hypocrisy of that mindset. And I'm not suggesting that's Republican or Democrat. I'm suggesting that's a particular mindset. And if you're one of those people that think that way, the danger of that for just mankind in general is it's a little scary. And I'm not a big fan of fear mongering. I don't get scared very often. But that part actually is a little worrisome. Makes me a little worrisome, because that person, and if you are that person, you're okay with it right now because it's your side winning, right? Your side is winning the mask battle. Your side is the virtuous side that can make everybody else feel bad, and you can shame them into thinking that they don't care. If you don't wear the mask properly, you certainly don't care about your fellow mankind. But these other people, myself included, are often wearing the masks properly. We're following the rules. We're not certainly going out of our way to be rebels. Some people are, but for the most part, when I'm in the airport, everybody's following the rules. I'm there all the time, but there's always a case where there's like a finite detail that somebody like this woman walking past finds and then just scolds this person in front of everybody. Sir, you need to put your mask on properly. Wow. Like that. He was in his late 50s, maybe early 60s. He doesn't need to be talked down to like a child. I'm sure he's done a lot in life where you can have a little bit more respect for him. At least give him time to stop fumbling with his water to put it back up. It's a little clumsy. It's not exactly something we're designed to do in society, is to wear a mask all the time to cover up our face and always make sure we're doing it properly. Got to take a break. Again, that segue of the trip compared to how it is now, that trip of 2019 makes me laugh. The trips these days, it saddens me. Absolutely saddens me. And people are talking science, and I'm going to get there in a second, but we want to talk science. Well, scientifically, if we're pushing the scientific narrative, if we're pushing a good narrative as far as health is concerned, why is the narrative wear your mask, social distance, and wash your hands? Not that those three things aren't good. That's good. You should. I mean, the wearing the mask part is I think, an opinion scientifically. I think it's a scientific opinion. It's not a scientific fact. And I'm gonna read something to you that a doctor wrote in 2016 that I found interesting. And I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but I will share I'll cite it where I got it from, and you can read it for yourself. And there were some others, but I don't want to bog down with a lot of numbers. I just everyone's always saying, "Why I follow the science. I follow the science." Well, if you look into science, you will discover that science disagrees. Some scientists will say one thing, some doctors will say others. There is also a rift in agreement of where science goes. Oh, but the majority of the science agrees with me. Well, I'm sure it does if you go to I'mAlwaysRight.com to basically, always solidify your point to being right. But if your goal is to research you being right, you're never going to be convinced of any other side other than your own anyway, which is probably a reason why you're one extreme to the other. The far left extreme has been much less of a decent human being towards people like me than the far right. And I probably addressed this earlier on in the podcast when I was opening it up. But what I've discovered is I can have a cordial debate with somebody on the right, even the far right, where let me retract that, because there's some crazies on the far right. But if you're solid right, you can have a decent debate with someone on solid right, and they're not going to start name calling if you make a valid point. They'll say, I'll look into that. And that's just the experience that I've had. With people on the left, I almost have to stay mute and let them voice their opinion and keep mine to myself. Because if I disagree with them, I'm immediately put to the far right side of being one of those extremists where, I hate everybody and I'm a racist, which I find hilarious, considering if anybody knows me, I'm far from that. I'm only laughing because it's just I know some of the most extreme Trump supporters in my life were black, and I don't always like saying that, but they're the ones who were talking to me about why I should reconsider voting, and because I've never been big into voting one side or the other, and people will think that's un-American, or if you're writing somebody in, that's un-American because you're just wasting a vote. And I've had some extreme right people that were like, Trump. And you would think, man, those racist rednecks. And it's like, well, you might call them racist, but we're talking about people who grew up in Compton and served in the military and thought completely different than what you would think they think. So before you have this preconceived judgment about somebody, understand that you're only looking at one side, and perhaps you're surrounded by too many of your own of groupthink. Maybe see other people in society. And that's where I used to be lucky, is because I was surrounded by so many different cultures. And I like that. I like that about people. And I think that's the reason why I've always liked international studies. I focused on international studies at the University of Chicago, and that was my thing. I don't know why I'm giving you a resume at this point, but that was my love for Arabic studies, and that's where I learned to read and write and speak Arabic. I don't do it well anymore, but I'm going back to that. I've always loved cultures, and people from other countries, I think, probably look at us and wonder why we can't seem to get along one side to the other. Other countries look at us as an example, right, in many cases, and they wonder why we're so frivolous at giving up certain rights and then so reckless at destroying ourselves within, because one side doesn't agree with us. And I'm going back to whatever riot you're looking at. Riots are riots, and I'm not coining any side on one or the other. But those people in general, they're extremists. They're just there to create and cause problems and chaos and destruction, and they want a civil war. And I can tell you that nobody in this country, deep down, who truly cares about this country, wants to see that happen. Doesn't want to see relationships get cheapened and get drawn in with a line saying, if you don't agree with me, we're always going to agree to disagree, and we're never going to try to come to a meeting of a mind to get along. And I've seen a lot of that happen, and it's dangerous and it's scary. We're talking washing our hands, covering our face, and social distancing. What we should be talking about, if we're really concerned about health, is eating right, exercising, and taking your vitamins. If you do those three things, you have already put yourself in a category of 99% survival rate if you're within the age of 15 and 64. So, I don't know if I'm 100% correct on that percentage, but I'm close, based on some things I've seen, and I'm sure numbers can change. But the survival rate of COVID is it's astounding, given the turmoil that it's caused and the narrative that the media has basically written. I've called the media about a year ago. I called them terrorists. I stand behind that completely, because the media, coupled with the social media, has created things within our country that never used to be. And as a result of that, we have put a rift in our country, and it's all been without any type of physical war. It's been through words. Words have fractured us in such a way that we have desensitized ourselves towards any other human. We've taken away the touch. We've taken away the feel. We've removed smiles and laughter. And I'm not trying to fearmonger myself. I'm just telling you what I live. I see it. It's nice to see. I like the fact that children under the age of 2 don't have to wear a mask. That's satisfying for me, because I like to see kids smile and laugh. It's the only time I get to see people smile that when I'm traveling and I'm surrounded by other drones like myself, or treated like drones. The narrative has turned into the brainwashing of, this is what science says. Wear a face mask, social distance, wash your hands. Every flight attendant reminds us that the moment we sit down into our seats, the moment we leave our seats, they tell us to be aware of your partner, to social distance, to wash your hands, keep your face mask on properly. No matter where you go, you're always reminded those 3 things. But to truly be healthy, you have to eat right and exercise and take your vitamins. But what about the mental health? What about the emotional damage that COVID has done to people that you don't see right now? because it's there. I saw in the news that COVID is the leading cause of death right now. I don't know if that's entirely true because I'm not sure where the numbers are at for 2020. I don't know if they're out there completely accurate, but I do know that number wouldn't have surpassed last year. And someone can fact check this, but I was reading it on the CDC.org the other day because I was just curious because I knew heart disease was a leading cause of death in the United States at 650,000 people plus. I mean, it's just over 650,000 people died in 2019. And the difference was that death rate was never talked about. That death rate didn't shut down businesses, didn't close out restaurants, didn't cause people to fracture relationships and, kind of stay away from people and trap yourselves in your four walls and not go out into society and get some vitamin D. And didn't cause any of that. The original threat was that COVID was going to kill millions of people. And if we pump the numbers up enough and we keep a COVID death count, which some of the news stations do keep a COVID, it's constant. I'll flip through and I'll see in the bottom right corner of COVID deaths. And it's like a death count of how many people have died today. It's a really morbid way of thinking, but it's a reminder to everybody of what a threat COVID is. But when you compare it to numbers of other stuff going on that we face, it doesn't make sense. I'm pulling up something that I read. I'm not going to read it all, but I got this from the U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institute of Health, and this is the surgical mask is a bad fit for risk reduction. It's written by Dr. Shane Nelson. This was back in 2016, and the premise of it is, I'm not going to read the whole article, but I'm going to read the last part that I found interesting. He kind of talks about the 1900s, the early 1900s, of all the pandemics that went along and what masks do to remind people and the threats and the misconceptions that masks give others and a reminder of what the threat is. And the premise of it that I took from it was that masks remind people that there's a threat. And, his idea was it gives a false premise of what masks actually do. People will look at a mask and they think, well, this is going to prevent me from getting a virus. This is going to prevent me from getting sick. This is a deterrent, perhaps, but is it a preventative? Does it slow the risk of getting COVID? Well, I don't know if it does or it doesn't. If it makes people feel better, then we're going to probably wear masks for a long time. I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. But it's not the mask as much as it is what the mask has emotionally, intellectually, and psychologically done at this point. I'm going to read the last paragraph of this particular thing on masks, and I'm probably going to close at that because you guys have already been patient enough. But you have questions, you have disagreements, you can leave it in the comments section on the YouTube channel. You can certainly message, and I go on the Twitter. I think I have a Twitter account and do that. If you leave it on the Twitter account and you do the tweet thing, I'm told it's tweeting, not twatting, but whatever. Do the tweeting thing. At some point, I'll get to that question or comment. I will say, if you're going to scream and holler along and you just want to yell at everybody, I'm not going to acknowledge that. I don't acknowledge people who can't have a decent conversation and be cordial with one another. At least just, if we're not going to be decent human beings, at least be cordial and pretend to care about other people's feelings at this point. Last paragraph from Dr. Shane Nelson. It says, we act out our, I'm going to have to pull this a little closer here to me. We act out our collective anxiety about pandemics by wearing masks, even when there isn't a pandemic. But wearing masks reinforces the idea of a possible future pandemic. The problem of effect in political terms is a contagious one. Fear spreads among the public, leading to intensification of risk management. The classic example being 9/11 and the war on terrorism. Fear of ineffective risk spreading communicably becomes an iconic pun. Pandemics occurred in 1918, 1957, 1968, 2003, and 2009. Mind you, this was written in 2016, so at this time he didn't know anything about COVID. Thus, the conversation changes from if the next pandemic will occur to when the next pandemic will occur. Because we are currently between pandemics, our existence is bookended by the realized threats of the past and the reasonable threats of the future to our detriment, with this detriment masked by the surgical mask itself. And he's arguing, he's at least bringing to light that the mask sends perhaps a fear that could threaten more than just fear alone. Fear breeds other things that create more fear, which creates a rift, which is certainly happened in this country, which I don't know if we 100% know the damage that's caused. We know how many deaths that COVID has hit based on the numbers that we see, in front of us every day. But we don't know the damage that's going to be caused by the families who've lost their businesses or their jobs, or people who've lost their loved ones that didn't have a chance to be at the funeral, of the elderly who are stuck in nursing homes that are ignored, and they're often mistreated because our country, unfortunately, rewards the youth who have done nothing to earn anything, and we punish the elderly who have been the bedrock of our society for years on end and helped build the beautiful things of this freedom of this country that we have. It's shameful. But as a result, we've ignored the elderly, and we feared others from going to visit them because it would have threatened them with COVID, and thus they die alone, and they don't see their loved ones, suffer from probably loneliness more than they do any virus threat. I don't know what's going to happen if I get to that age, but I do know if I'm elderly, I would more likely want to be around loved ones, whether or not there was a fear of a threatening virus or not. But that's just me. If my years are numbered, I want to spend some time with those that I loved and appreciate that. But again, that's just me, and I know I'm going to get a lot of disagreement on that. Probably a lot of hate, but if you have hate towards that position, there's something wrong with you as a human. I don't see how you can justify that and look at yourself in the mirror and think that's okay. That an elderly is better off to just sit in a corner by themselves rather than being threatened by COVID because you could possibly be a carrier. So you're better off to be safe and alone and by yourself and die alone than be surrounded by loved ones, which I would argue that most elderly want to be surrounded by their loved ones. I'm not old, so I don't know, but that's just my perspective as a human. Again, we are creatures of communication. We're creatures of intellect. We're creatures of creating societies, being surrounded by others. We're not designed to be secluded. We're not designed to be in quarantine. How much longer can that go on before, other health risks take place? I consider myself a very healthy guy. I recently did test my VO2, which ironically was, after I just got over what I consider a violent flu, and it was better than what it was last year. So I know I'm in good shape, but physical shape isn't always mental good shape. And I know COVID has exhausted people, in just the amount of like what it's extended to, when I think most of us, at least I thought, it would be done by now. It's not. I know we don't know what's going on, and there's probably a second spread coming. I mean, if this is the new norm, we're in trouble. If this is the way we're going to handle the new norm, we are in trouble. Especially when you can't show me 100% based on the numbers that this is the biggest threat to our society. I'm not minimizing 400,000 deaths, but I'm also not minimizing 650,000 deaths. And more than that, in 2019, 47,511 deaths. Now, that was 2019. That's on suicide. Most people will avoid that word. I'm not going to. I've known people who've done it. That number goes higher if you are a military veteran, and I know something about that too. I know that there's a 22 number that's been around. I've done push-ups in the past to kind of bring awareness to it, that 22 veterans a day have committed suicide. The numbers of between the ages of 15 and 45, if you look at the CDC, and I'm not going to read the numbers, but you can look into the CDC, more people are likely to hurt themselves than to actually be hurt by somebody else and murdered. More people are more likely to commit suicide than actually die of homicide. And that kind of brings to light something, and this was before COVID. Do you think those numbers have dropped? I would suggest that they didn't, and if they did, I would want to know what took place to that. I'm not going to buy into the conspiracy that COVID numbers are puffed up for whatever reason, but I do believe COVID is usually the responsible a party in most deaths that perhaps wasn't the main cause of their death. And I think we've given credit to something that isn't 100% credit. So those people that have been committing suicide in 2020, I'm wondering if that was a COVID charged death or not. That's at least curious and worth kind of looking into. But I don't see those numbers on the CDC, and maybe I was overlooking something when I was kind of going through it. I shudder to think what the numbers are compared to what they were last year and how they've perhaps gone up. And hopeful is one thing, but realistic is the other. I'm assuming they probably have gone up during all of this. I don't want to end on a downer. So let's, maybe it's too late for that, but this is that case where it's like reality of fitness going into politics just doesn't mix. They don't want to push that part. They want to push their own narrative, even though the getting into shape, eating right, taking your vitamins is one of the strongest cases of this triangle of three that you can give people, more so than wearing a face mask, social distancing, and washing your hands. Not that those three things are bad, but they certainly don't hold the strength to the other three things of being fit, eating right, taking your vitamins. And I'd even argue having healthy relationships. People that value you and you value them, and you have a healthy exchange. People who give you time and give you enough, of their time, where it's not, you're not just getting their leftovers, which these days it's like, oh, I'll give you what I can give you, and you should be grateful for that, and that's what you get. We're just quick to dismiss people, and I find that shameful. That's all I got on this with this, masking the real problem. That's really what it's about. We're masking the real problem of what has been created. Some people believe a lot of this is political. I'm starting to think that maybe. I don't think it's just ironic to come back to Chicago after there's been a changing of the guards, so to speak, and then suddenly now Chicago is like, well, it's about time to start opening up. Nobody in Chicago talks that way, but it makes me feel better. Yeah, that's ironic. I don't know. I guess they can congratulate themselves because, their side can claim victory for a short period of time, but can anybody right now at this point in our country claim victory at all? We're in I hate to be the doomsdayer, but we're at a point in our society that's it's at a major potential catastrophe unless we plug some of these leaks that we have. And we maybe put a tourniquet on the bleeding financially that's happening because of some of these decisions, right or left, right or wrong, blue or red, regardless of where we stand. In the big picture, I would hope, from my perspective of the states, that we should all be wanting to come together, not just as Americans, but just citizens of culture, citizens of mankind, treating people like human beings and not just a number. Technology has depersonalized us in such a way that we're quick to dismiss, we're quick to cancel. And at some point, like, that feels good when you're on the winning side, that everybody that disagrees with me is going to be canceled, and let's call out all the people that have disagreed with us and let's cancel them so they don't have a chance. That's scary when you take that stance, because flip that script, and what if you're on the other side? And what if the other side happens to be a little bit more tyrannical, a little bit more dictatorship? And the more you go flip from one extreme to the next, the more power one side gets than the other. If you're on the losing side of that battle is scary. Let's go back to meeting in the middle. Let's go back to thinking for ourselves and getting away from the groupthink. Challenging one another. And treating people like humans. Appreciating one another's time. And knowing that there are people out there, they might be surrounded by everybody, but they really don't have anybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of the podcast. I hope you have any questions. I hope you leave it in the comment section. Make it friendly, but hey, let's open the minds, the hearts, and let's meet in the middle and let's talk about it. Thanks for listening. Always remember, eat healthy, train hard, most especially have fun. I'm Relentless Jake, and until next time, I'm out.